Alexander's is a member of the Apiaceae family, or carrot family, which has some of the best wild edibles, but also has some of the deadliest plants found in the UK, so extra care has to be taken when foraging these plants. And just make sure that you can identify the deadly poisonous hemlock water dropwort if you're going to forage Alexander's. But once you're 100% sure of your ID, then Alexander's is a great plant to forage. So it mostly grows around the coast and around estuaries, but it can also be found inland occasionally. And it's quite an early growing plant. It will be in full bloom by around mid-March. The whole plant is edible. This time of year I'm looking for the unopened flower buds, and they're a bit like a wild broccoli. Also, the stems can be used in a similar way to celery when they're young. When they go a bit too old, they can go very fibrous, but ones like this should be fine, as long as they're still quite pliable. And they're very nice candied. The leaves grow in groups of 3. They're quite glossy. When you crush the leaves, you'll get a mild peppery smell. The leaves are bluntly toothed, and if you look very closely at the very tips of the leaves, you'll see a little white pinprick, and that is quite a good ID feature for Alexander's. The stems are thick and quite strong, and where the leaf stems come and meet the main stem, there's a very distinctive looking protective shroud, which is white with red veins, and that is another quite good ID feature for Alexander's. And Alexander's has small, dense umbels of yellow flowers. Generally, I don't eat the flowers once they've opened. It's these unopened ones that I eat, and as I said, just use them in the same way that you would broccoli. Now, Alexander's has quite a strong and unique flavour. A lot of people can find it a bit overpowering, but yeah, I really enjoy it. I like eating the flowers of these primrose when I'm out walking in early spring. So in my area, in the southwest of England, these start to appear right at the beginning of March, so they're a really good sign that spring is on the way. Their name, primrose, comes from the Latin prima rosa, or first rose. And if you catch them in the morning, just as they're opening, they can be really nice and sweet. The flowers grow 1 flower per stem, and they have 5 petals, which have notched lobes. So they're a pale yellow colour, and they're darker yellow in the centre. The flower stems are either green or with a bit of a red tinge, and they are slightly hairy. The leaves grow in a basal rosette. They're oblong and have a very crinkly texture, and they're quite furry. On the underside they have a very pronounced white midrib. The only plant that you may mistake this for are the closely related cowslips, which they're edible as well. This is a common sow thistle. Now they're not actually a thistle, they're a member of the Asteraceae family, the same as daisies and sunflowers. So they'll grow just about anywhere on roadsides and recently disturbed soils, and they will grow up to about 1.5 meters. This is quite a small one here. I generally don't eat them when they're at this stage. They're not quite as nice, they're a bit bitter, but I like them when the rosettes are just starting to appear and they're quite young and fresh and the leaves are a lot brighter green. You can find them pretty much all year, but around March, April is when they're at their best. There are several types of sow thistle. This is the common sow thistle, Sonchus oleraceus. And this one is a prickly sow thistle, Sonchus asper, which looks more like a true thistle. The leaves form a basal rosette on younger plants, and as the plant matures, it will grow a central stem. The leaves higher up on the plant will be clasping the stem. The leaves are deeply lobed and look very much like dandelion, which they're closely related. And the stem is hollow and has a milky white latex when cut. You can eat the whole plant, the leaves, the stem, the root and the young flower buds, but it's best to eat the basal leaves as the upper leaves are a bit too bitter. Just use them like lettuce, or you can fry them, and they're very high in antioxidants. The only plant you really mistake this for is dandelion, but sow thistles grow a lot bigger, and also dandelions will only grow one flower per stem, whereas sow thistles will grow several flowers per stem. A walk through open woodland in spring is a good time to see violets. For me, they come up around mid-March and then last throughout April, and when you start seeing the lesser celandine, the violets usually follow a few weeks after these. The flowers and leaves of violets are edible, but the roots and seeds are toxic. There are several species of violet in the UK, but as long as the flowers are like a purplish blue or white, then they're edible. I've read a few sources that say yellow violets can cause a bit of a stomach upset, but I've never actually seen them in the wild. The most common are sweet violets, which have quite a nice strong sweet smell, and also common dog violets, which I think these are because they don't have the smell. But to be honest, all I can smell is wild garlic, because there's wild garlic everywhere around here. And also hairy violet, which is covered in fine white hairs. All of those are edible. The leaves of all violets are heart-shaped to kidney-shaped, and they're dark green and have quite a crinkly texture, and they grow in a rosette. So the flowers have 5 petals. There's 2 at the top which are folded back and look a bit like rabbit's ears, and then 2 on the side that are folded forwards, and 1 at the bottom which is quite heavily veined. And the flowers are a lighter colour in the centre. The flowers can be used to make tea or violet syrup, and they're good candied and used as a decoration for cakes. Although I do suggest not picking too many unless they're growing in a large number, because they're becoming quite a lot less common in the UK due to lack of habitat and overpicking. So yeah, if there's only a few plants like this, I generally don't pick them at all. But if you do find them in large numbers, then take a few and try them out. The leaves can be eaten raw in salads or cooked as a green, and violet flowers and leaves can be used as a herbal tea to help treat headaches and insomnia. Nettles have to be one of our most underrated and underused plants in the UK. They're really nutritious and they're a superfood, and they grow everywhere. I think people maybe are put off by the fact that they sting, but once you cook them they lose that sting. And yeah, as I said, they're highly nutritious. They've got quite a high level of protein, I think like 5%, which is very high for a plant. And they're high in fatty acids and vitamins A and C. So they're best to eat this time of year in the early spring, just so you get these nice bright green tips coming up, and you just eat the top few inches. That's the part that's most nutritious. I mostly eat stinging nettles in soups. I like mixing them with wild garlic and potato. It makes a nice nutritious spring soup, or just mixed in with other greens. To ID nettles, the first most obvious way is that they sting. Also, the leaves are oval and cordate or heart-shaped at the base, and they have a pointed tip, and they're quite heavily toothed. Also, they're net-veined, or the veins just kind of spread out. And the only thing you might really mistake these for are dead nettles. So nettles really like fertilised soil, and they grow anywhere around human habitation, so around towns or around farms, which, to be fair, in the UK is pretty much everywhere. I highly recommend making the most of these in spring. This is when they're at their best. You don't want to be eating them in the summer after they've flowered, because they start to get a build-up of crystals in the leaves. I think it's calcium crystals, and they can cause kidney stones. So don't eat them after the plant's gone to flower, but this time of year they're really good. It is best to wear gloves when you're harvesting them, but if you're not wearing gloves, you can just grip them really quickly, because all of the hairs are growing upwards. So if you grab them in an upwards motion, you shouldn't get stung like that. These are purple dead nettle, Lamium purpureum, a nice common edible that you'll find growing all around field edges, often in quite big patches, and you'll find them alongside country roads as well. So they're not actually related to the stinging nettle, and they don't sting. They're actually a member of the mint family, and like all mints, they have that characteristic square stem. So the leaves look fairly similar to the stinging nettle. They grow in an opposite arrangement, and they're oval, and they have a toothed edge. But out of the dead nettles, I'd say these look the least like stinging nettles. The white dead nettle and the yellow dead nettle, which I'll show next month, they look very similar to stinging nettles. So the leaves of the purple dead nettle are a bit smaller than the other dead nettles, and if you look at the leaves at the top of the plant, you can see they're purple, which really gives this plant away. The light pinky purple flowers are quite nice and sweet, especially if you catch them early in the morning. They make quite a nice little decoration for salads as well. I usually just pick the top part of the plant, the growing tip, because that's where most of the nutrition is in spring. So these do grow in quite large patches usually, but I always make sure there's plenty left for the bees because they really like these flowers. It's a good source of nectar for them in early spring. Another good salad ingredient in March are these hawthorn leaves, just as they're opening. They're not particularly tasty, they don't have much of a flavour, but they are very nutritious. And what I'll do is just pick these and mix them in with other salad greens, just to get that extra bit of nutrition. So hawthorn leaves, when they're fully open, are very deeply lobed and they're quite small, but I generally don't eat them once they're opened because they're a bit more bitter. Yeah, ones just like this as they're not open yet. They're quite nice. They can have a bit of a nutty flavour. Just watch out for the really sharp thorns on the twigs. You'll find hawthorn all along country roads, and it's used as hedging to divide fields as well. March is the time to be tapping trees. You can tap birch, maples and walnuts. So in this area, birch is the most popular. It depends where you are to what sort of time. For me it's early to mid-March. Just don't take too much sap from any one tree. It's a very nice, refreshing, sugary drink, birch sap. Just make sure if you're using the knife method, use a nice clean knife so the tree doesn't get infected. And after you've taken the sap, just give it a good knock to help it seal. You can also use the twig method, where you just cut off at an angle, cut the twig, and then let the sap pour out that way. It only really works for gathering a small amount. But I never really take more than a litre of the sap from a nice mature tree. I have done a video on tapping birch in more detail. I'll leave a link to that in the description. So those are some of the wild foods that I would say are at their peak in March, but that's by no means all there is to forage this time of year. I'll leave a list in the description of this video of other plants and fungi that you can forage this time of year, but I'll include them in other videos in this series. Okay, thanks for watching UK Wildcrafts.